In the richest country on earth, people shouldn't be forced to leave their family, their friends, church, and community just to find stable work.
I'm the president of the Young Democrats here, and we just kind of got started or restarted come the beginning of this year, the end of last year. It's been a really great experience this year. 2017, I think, was a great year for all of the Democrats across the state. And just here at Radford University. My friend Tom McIntyre over here, he's our VP. And we started as in a room with 4 or 5 guys. We grew into an organization working with campaigns and other organizations to register over 1,300 students to vote in 2017. Yeah. You know, we also drove up the Democratic voters in our eastern precinct of Radford by 200%, and more people voted Democratic in our east precinct than even voted in 2013, which we are heavily proud of. You know, this year, people counted out students and people counted out Radford students. They said, young people don't care, you know, we just don't want to get active, but we saw this year that students are willing to go out in the cold and in the rain and sometimes on weekends when they could be doing a few other things, and get out there and talk to other students on what's important to them and what they think should happen with our elected officials. So, you know, we thought it was important to be here tonight to welcome another young and energized candidate to a race in our own backyards in the 9th District of Virginia. And this election is just another step to build a community that focuses on our democratic values and that makes sure that all of our voices are heard. So I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker, who will introduce our man of the night. And so Lynda Majors, if you can go ahead and come up.
I'm Lynda Majors from Montgomery County, and Justin asked me to say a few words to introduce him. My husband and son wondered why Justin picked me, and everybody else is too now, to talk at a political event. And I think that the answer is that I've become a political person in the last 3 years while I have been rallying people in Montgomery County in the fight to save our beautiful land and clean water from the very destructive proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline. Recently, a newly elected member of the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors told me that as he was campaigning, people did not know who he was, but they all knew who Lynda Majors was. So hopefully, if you know me, my testimonial today for Justin will inspire you to help him in his quest to represent the 9th District in the U.S. Congress in 2018. Many of my fellow pipeline fighters, like me, are in their mid-50s to mid-80s, though by the time we win this fight, it could be late 80s. More than 20 years ago, the same people were working to prevent Interstate 73 from ripping through the same area. The fight to prevent the pipeline from destroying the life that we have here in the New River Valley has been long, hard, and bruising. Justin is the perfect candidate to fight for us in the 9th District. He has always been focused on achieving the highest level of performance in any endeavor that he decides to engage in. For 4 years straight, Justin has ridden in the Mountains of Misery bike ride up to Mountain Lake. For anyone that is not familiar with that road, it is brutal. It has steep grades that equal any in the district. As he told me just last night, he's not fast, but he has great endurance and gets immense satisfaction in getting to the top of the mountain to the finish. As he cheers the other racers and shares in their common goal of finishing the 100-mile ride, there is great fulfillment in having conquered the last 4 miles and the 12 to 16% grade to the finish. As a young Boy Scout, he demanded excellence from his dad in camping, canoeing, and general outdoor knowledge. But Justin had a dad that was not Mr. Outdoorsman, but Mr. PhD. I remember Justin's frustration, distress, and embarrassment on father-son camping canoeing trips when the boys were partnered with their own dads. Justin and his dad would be zigzagging down the river, while other boys with more skillful fathers were paddling in a straight line. If a canoe was hung up on the rocks, it was probably the Santopietros. But he persisted, finding a solution to the problem, later buying his own kayak, charting his own way down Virginia's rivers. Justin's background of hiking, camping, and canoeing and fishing in the 9th District gives him a good appreciation of our natural resources of clean water and air that we all enjoy. As you can see from the website, Justin has been a proud fisherman since he was in preschool. I have looked around me in my fight against Mountain Valley Pipeline and do not see any 30 and 40-year-old citizens helping us now old baby boomers in the fight to save Virginia's clean air and water, or leading the charge as we did 20-plus years ago in the I-73 fight. These struggles to save our clean air and water in Virginia are all-encompassing and involve dedicated work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whatever we are able to hold on to is a legacy of the millennials and the next generations, but it does not come without vigilance and work from every generation. Justin understands how distressing it is for the citizens to realize that the government agencies whose stated mission is to look after what we assumed were inalienable rights of clean air and water, automatically granted to all Virginia citizens, seems to be under the control of corporations like Mountain Valley Pipeline. Any Virginia stream fisherman is an advocate for clean water and no 42-inch pipeline that will cause sediment to be deposited in every Virginia stream that it crosses, decimating fishing and fisheries. On high school and college vacations, Justin and his friends went on camping trips all over the 9th District, from Covington to Grayson Highlands. They camped and saw up close and personal people struggling to make ends meet and saw firsthand the difficult domestic situations made worse by poverty and hopelessness of no future. Justin's experience on the Hill in Washington, D.C. uniquely qualifies him to be ready to represent our interests immediately. In fact, he has already mocked up a bill amending the Natural Gas Act of 1937 to prevent any future insane ideas for transporting gas over the steep slopes and through the seismic zones of the Appalachians. I know the team of millennials that have been working on his campaign behind the scenes for months already, and as you can see with the rollout of the announcement, they are seriously dedicated to Justin's successful run for Congress. Their time has come. I am therefore proud and pleased that Justin Santopietro, a millennial, is answering the call to government service in his quest to represent and help all the citizens of Virginia. Therefore, I am enthusiastically introducing Justin Santopietro, running for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Congress in 2018.
Well, thank you, Lynda, for that kind introduction, and thanks to Jack and the Radford Young Dems for having us here tonight in this great space. I'm Justin Santopietro, and I am officially running for the Democratic nomination for Virginia's 9th District. Southwest Virginia is my home, and I deeply love its culture, its mountains, its streams, but most importantly, its people. Because from the time of our country's founding, these mountains have been a refuge, a new home for generations of Americans, both old and new. Many of you may know that Appalachia first provided the Scots-Irish settlers a secure homestead away from the English elite who had repeatedly turned them away. And over the centuries, Southwest Virginia has developed its own unique corner of the American experiment. Not quite Southern, not quite Eastern, not quite Rust Belt, and definitely not Northern, our little corner of Virginia has always defied definition and expectation. But it wasn't until settlers struck black gold that Appalachia solidified its role as the powerhouse of the booming American economy. The sweat, blood, and toil of those thousands of men deep underneath the ground powered Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York, Baltimore, and Boston, the great eastern cities, to their dizzying heights. And as the decades passed, Appalachia distinguished itself even from the rest of Virginia, as its support for the Confederacy and later the massive resistance to school integration was by far the weakest in the entire Commonwealth. Not long after, the Fightin' Ninth's man in Congress, Pat Jennings, was the only member of the Virginia delegation to vote in favor of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and one of only 2 Virginia congressmen to vote for the creation of Medicare. And later, as the Southern strategy of wedge politics began turning the South red, the 9th District elected and 13 times re-elected the great Rick Boucher, who dedicated decades of his life to serve this district. To this day, people all over Southwest Virginia can point to roads, bridges, industrial parks, and other federally funded projects that Representative Boucher secured for this district. That's because Rick understood that the job of a public servant is to faithfully serve the public, not any political party, not large donors, and certainly not ideologies. Because the dominant ideologies of our time are fundamentally closed-minded, outdated, and regressive. They offer absolutely no solutions for our 21st century problems. So, my friends, the challenge that lies before us is to determine whether we want to be merely a collection of individuals or a true nation. As people, we have many ways of building bonds with each other. We share our homes, our dinner tables, our religions, and our cultures with each other. But another way in which we define ourselves as a nation is through our common government. It is in Washington, and only in Washington, that 300 million voices across 3,000 miles of land and water can coalesce into one sound. We must again learn to build and retain commitment to our neighbors, regardless of race, income, or sexuality. Without this force, we are not likely to remain one nation, indivisible, under God. A democratic, secular, and constitutionally based government is an inherently good structure that I see as one of God's greatest gifts to us. And what a gift that can be. The ability to cooperate and organize ourselves to accomplish together what no individual could do alone. A government represents more than just buildings, flags, and well-coiffed politicians. A democratic government represents the ability of people to join together to make collective actions and gives the common man the power to solve common problems. At its best, a government can empower and protect those citizens who are intrinsically driven by a sense of altruism, a sense of loyalty to a cause greater than oneself. We are a social species by our nature, and it is through government that our humanity can be truly mechanized for good. And to do that in a way that is democratic, fair, and effective was the original intent and ambition of our great Constitution. But tragically, over the past few decades, radical elements of our society have sought to jam and undermine our democracy. They actively prevent government from achieving its true purpose and do so on behalf of powerful interests. By corrupting and deadlocking Congress, they ensure that new laws cannot be made, and the ones that are made are hopelessly inadequate. By relentlessly cutting government spending where it matters, and by spewing nasty anti-government rhetoric, they deliberately prevent adequate enforcement of our existing laws. All of this combined has led to the negative view of government felt by many Americans, and the cynicism toward the entire process that consumes those in Washington. This rightward movement has been radical, deliberate, and gradual. Just like the frog that remains calm in a slowly boiling pot of water, we've barely noticed as American politics has moved ever farther away from the representative democracy that our founders envisioned. In this modern world, which progresses ever faster, a government in stagnation is in fact a government in retreat. And as such a government falls behind, it leaves exposed its most vulnerable citizens, the young, the elderly, the poor, and the sick. We must always resist those who seek to accelerate the government's dysfunction and abandonment of its citizens. But now we stand at the receiving end of decades of a carefully crafted political strategy that has now reached a fever pitch. We cannot hope to counter that with more division, more hatred, or more anger. No matter how hot or vitriolic the rhetoric may get, we must remember that we are on the side of the vast majority of Americans. We must keep cool heads, be patient, and above all, love the souls of those who we disagree with. So if we Democrats want to succeed, we have to get our hands dirty. We need to enter those working class communities to develop personal understandings of the problems that working people face. All this must be done with the utmost desire to just get to work achieving real results. We don't need any more philosophizing, any more gratuitous recreational debating for its own sake, and no more he said, she said bickering. We need a renewed focus on action to get things moving again. Because once the American people start to feel justice, start to feel fairness, when their wallets start thickening, we'll be amazed at how quickly much of this toxic rhetoric fades away. So we can't just continue to wage a reactive and rhetorical culture war. It just doesn't work, and we're all sick to hell of it. So if we're going to save our nation, we must go on the offensive by fearlessly proposing new, bold ideas to get our country working again. And I can say with the utmost confidence that America's problems are all man-made. That is, they are caused only by political barriers. Our nation does not lack for food, it doesn't lack for housing, for security, for hard work, for intelligence, for health. What our nation lacks in 2017 is real leadership. That's why I put together what I think is one of the most detailed policy platforms out there, because Americans deserve to know what their representatives believe. This platform is a product of years living and studying and working in the nation's capital. I strongly believe that our American economy can be built on fairness, with laws that do enough to protect consumers and workers, but also remain simple and straightforward so that businesses aren't overly burdened. So, despite the 2010 healthcare overhaul, our medical system is still too complicated, expensive, and inadequate. That's why I want to expand our great Medicare system so it can be an option for all Americans. Under my plan, which I'm calling AmeriCare, veterans, low-income Americans, and all citizens will be eligible for various tiers of Medicare coverage if they choose it. Our tax code as well, extremely complicated and outdated. Working people continue to pay too much in taxes while the rich continue to get richer. But unlike the hideous tax bill passed by the House of Representatives just hours ago, my plan delivers tax relief to all small businesses, workers, and families. It is centered around the basic idea that the government should tax bad things and not good things. This means reducing tax burdens on work, employment, and production, and shifting them towards social ills like concentrated wealth. The payroll tax, for example, automatically sucks way too much money away from hardworking Americans. My plan would increase the value of work by allowing those families to keep more of their hard-earned money. With this tax relief, the average working family would instantly see their take-home pay go up by 7% across the board, and businesses would also see a boost in their bottom lines. I also want to cut taxes on businesses because America's business people should be free to spend their valuable time and resources on running their enterprises, not filing paperwork and jumping through hoops. And we can make up for that by rebuilding the estate tax, or as I call it, the dynasty tax, which is one of the fairest and most American taxes ever devised. This country was founded on the principles of hard work and self-sufficiency, in deliberate contrast to the dynasties and inherited wealth that plagued old Europe. So the best way to make sure America remains the land of opportunity for all is to again start taxing large estates so our nation's wealth doesn't become concentrated among a handful of powerful families who can pass their massive wealth on to their children. In this day and age, where trillions of dollars of wealth are being hoarded by just a few hundred families, we can use this tax to level the playing field for the millions that are being left behind. In order to rebuild America's middle class, we need to protect the rights of workers to stand up for themselves if they need to. We also need to raise the minimum wage and permanently tie it to the rate of inflation. We can't keep relying on Congress to get its act together every couple of years to raise the minimum wage. It's been nearly 10 years since Congress last raised the minimum wage from $5.50 to $7.25, and that was 12 years before the last raise. We also need to make higher education available and affordable to every single American citizen. And this is hardly a new or radical idea. In fact, it's what many American colleges and universities used to do. So my college plan zeroes out tuition fees at all community colleges, public colleges, and universities in the U.S. Once we realize that higher education is an investment and not an expense, it makes perfect sense to help everyone get the skills and training they need. An educated workforce is a strong workforce that can be both more productive and more adaptive to our changing global economy. Now, the cost of eliminating tuition fees is estimated to be about $75 billion a year, While this may sound like a lot, this figure is barely 1/10 of this year's defense spending. Furthermore, this cost will be offset by imposing a small tax on Wall Street speculators, many of whom nearly destroyed the economy 10 years ago. And when it comes to Wall Street, I understand the changes made by the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act were very important, and I support many of those changes. And because of my experience in the financial services industry, I understand the importance of a healthy and robust financial sector. While it's not often stated, the reality is that U.S. banks are public-private partnerships, essentially utilities, that exist for the public purposes of providing a safe and reliable payment system and extending credit to consumers and businesses. Such institutions should be as simple and lean as possible. But unfortunately, the U.S. financial system remains too big, too dangerous, and too powerful. The top 10 banks in the United States now hold nearly half of all deposits, leaving the other half split among the thousands of smaller institutions. And it's important to remember that finance itself produces nothing. It's just really a large bookkeeping system. We call it financial services because finance is supposed to serve the real productive economy. But now, nearly a decade after the Wall Street crash, we still have a financial sector that serves itself first and foremost while extracting billions of dollars out of the real productive economy. That's why one of my top priorities is to downsize the big banks and financial companies. I'm a big believer in the power of small, localized finance embodied by the thousands of community banks and credit unions around our country. These local institutions aren't too big to fail and have reputations in their communities that they must live up to. These small institutions are usually more efficient, have less overhead, and are better managed than the Wall Street behemoths. Similarly, my expertise in public finance means I can say with total confidence that the U.S. can immediately afford to take on a multitude of bold, new national projects. The U.S. government can and must begin to finance a new nationwide network of freight and high-speed passenger rail, an expansion of ultra-high-speed internet and Wi-Fi, a massive increase in commercial and in residential energy efficiency, innovation in energy production, and mass modernization of our waste and drinking water systems. We can protect the environment for future generations and create thousands of stable, well-paying jobs in Southwest Virginia at the same time. Despite what some politicians may say, this really isn't rocket science. With the right tax and spending policies, we can create jobs for people right in the communities where they already live, doing the things they already know how to do. In the richest country on earth, people shouldn't be forced to leave their family, their friends, church, and community just to find stable work. Despite what the cynics and naysayers claim, the U.S. can in fact afford to prepare itself for the future. If we can get beyond political barriers, we can finally push through this era of grinding stagnation and reach toward that better world we all know is possible. Now, the barriers to this happening are enormous, and the naysayers are many. But as I frequently say, we can draw on the experience of our grandfathers for guidance on this great challenge. On December 6, 1941, the United States had almost no army, no air force, and half of its navy had just been destroyed. If I had gone to the White House that day and said, Mr. Roosevelt, I'm here to tell you that in 4 years' time we will have defeated the Nazi Reich, the Empire of Japan, have 0% unemployment, and have in our military arsenal a weapon capable of destroying an entire city in seconds, the Secret Service would have carried me off before I could draw my next breath. But as we know, in 4 years' time, that is exactly what America accomplished. Those years were an unprecedented time of national economic activity that was initiated and managed by the federal government, and the world has never been the same. So, as it was for our grandparents, fear itself shall be our only obstacle. It is in confronting these challenges that we can reveal a new American purpose. The forces that resist change have more power than any of us can fully comprehend, but they can and will crumble faster than the Berlin Wall if we, the people, demand it. And my friends, that is the core beauty of our American democracy. If we can learn to work together, acknowledge and overcome our weaknesses, and throw ourselves full-heartedly into this cause, not only will we save our country, but we will forever elevate the power of democracy itself. The preamble to our great Constitution, the very words that kicked off this American experiment, begins with "we the people." Not we the shareholders, not we the taxpayers, not we the special interests, not we the privileged, but we the people. So starting tonight, let's come together to start the work of fulfilling Martin Luther King's dream, to start bending that long arc of history back towards justice. I challenge and ask each and every one of you here tonight and listening tonight to join us in body and spirit for this most American of efforts. Thank you all so much for coming. I really, really appreciate it.